Cool. So the challenges of tracking in these first-party agents. So the first one is what I coined the identity crisis as of this morning. But it's essentially when you think about how digital analytics has traditionally worked, a lot of the digital analytics data that you are capturing or collecting from a website or app, it tends to be like structured, right? So typically there's a very strict format. So you might have like a category, action, or label, right? And then that will represent some sort of like custom event. And you kind of know what format that data will land inside like GA or whatever analytics tool that you're using. LLMs, on the other hand, are on the other end of that spectrum, right? So the prompts that you typically will give it is some sort of text-based like language, which is typically unstructured. And then the LLM itself, when it returns a response, it's also in unstructured data. So there's basically this really strong tension between like how LLMs are inherently built in terms of using unstructured data and how kind of like traditional digital analytics has, or obviously like operated within the last like decade or right. The other thing is, so when customers like interact with these first-party agents, you're not probably going to have like page views. You're not going to have like clicks. You might still have like similar events like add to cart or transactions that you kind of do throughout the agent. But a lot of these like traditional events or what we call out-of-the-box tracking that you might usually be accustomed to, they kind of will change, and some of the metrics that or like dimensions that you may need to look at might also change. So as an example, like how many people care about sessions, like session counts, right? Like everyone uses sessions in some way or shape, right? So like a lot of the metric that you might do when you're interacting with the agent is like you might actually have like agentic sessions, like how many agentic sessions were started and how many of those actually ended in a conversion. So some of the dimensions and metrics that you might be focused on will change and break down as these customers start interacting with the agent as opposed to navigating the UI of your website or app. This is also like a pretty common one, I think, which is the cold start problem. So like agents by default have really terrible pickup lines. So every time you start like a new session with an agent, it never knows who you are. It never knows what you've been doing in the past. So we kind of call this with the cold start problem, right? So if you don't give it enough like context when it kind of boots up, when the customer first interacts with it, the user basically, even though they may have been spending a well-extended period of time on your website prior to interacting with the agent, they kind of feel like, oh, I'm starting from zero, right? So this cold start problem is also quite a unique problem that agents will encounter. And PII Everywhere. So like I think some research has basically shows that why some humans don't really trust the output of AI. They also is like people from the other side of the spectrum where they actually trust chatbots and agents a lot more than actual humans. And I think just because like agents don't really judge you and they're very supportive most of the time. So it's quite common that people will reveal like sensitive information about themselves. We're actually thinking about the repercussions of that impact. So like a lot of the data that will flow through these agents and potentially land inside like a brand's like actual data collection could also contain quite a PII information. And then this one here is like the model changes beneath you. So moving back to the start of the presentation where I said like a lot of these agents will be built on these out-of-the-box models that OpenAI, Google, Anthropic will provide you. So those models can actually change beneath you. So if you're basically building these agents on top of these pre-built models, if those vendors basically change how their models operate or like the outputs start changing, you're basically impacting your customer experience because you kind of have the ground underneath you change without you actually noticing, and there's like no indication that it may be happening. So if I had to like kind of do like an analogy, like so SEO algorithms, right? So when Google changes an SEO algorithm and you see your organic traffic like drop to the bottom or like it rises significantly, you don't really know what happens unless Google tells you that they changed the SEO algorithm. So a bit like a similar situation, I guess, with these models as well.